Right, so my name's Paul Jewell. I'm the DSO Development Manager for Western Power, so I'm definitely involved in this sort of DSO transition and the new flexible ways of working. What we're doing now is different to what you might have experienced if you've been to a previous stakeholder session, because we'd normally give you a 10 or 15 minute presentation on a topic and then we'd go and talk about it. I've got the task of getting through 5 topics in 15 minutes, 5 unrelated topics, so it's going to be a very quick canter through. But as Alex has said, all I really want to do is give you our views on the landscape and the context of the discussion so that you can then have that in the back of your mind and start thinking about commitments and priorities that we need to achieve. The first one from Alex's list was network reliability. So this is talking about how does the network perform? How often are you on supply or do you go off supply? And it's really important. It gets better and it sort of underpins what we do. We're in the business of keeping the lights on, and that is one of our key objectives. It's how we deal with it on a day-to-day basis. I'll talk about storms in a minute. But on the right-hand side of the screen, there are some key contexts, and these are the ways that Ofgem measure each of the network operators, and they measure us against each other. So they do look at customer minutes lost. They look at how many minutes all our customers were off supply as a measure of the duration of power cuts. They look at interruptions, so they're looking at how many customers were interrupted, which you can then do a measure of do customers have long power cuts or short power cuts. Also with that, you can then have the measure, which is the one at the bottom, which is worst served customers. So if the same customers are having lots of power cuts, there's another measure that you can bring in here. The measure that I didn't talk about that's halfway down that green box is short interruptions. Short interruptions is a measure of power cuts that last less than 3 minutes. Now, why do we treat them differently? But there's equipment on our network which will help restore supplies automatically. And a lot of it needs a short period of time to make sure the network is safe and intact before it re-energizes. Most of that happens within 3 minutes, so Ofgem treat that as separately to a fault where you stay off for a long time. But is that right? Is that the right duration? And is that the right measure? It could be some of the discussion you have about whether that's important or not. When I was running a district, which is quite a few years ago now, everybody used to moan about short interruptions because they always had to reset the clock on the video. But I think videos and clocks have both moved on in that time, so maybe there's a different priority for people. But that's the area that we work in that. And that's the context of where your discussion should be. Now that means we're moving on to the second one. Well, actually we're not, because I need to show you this. You know we said we give you a blank piece of paper? We're giving you a blank piece of paper with some writing on it. As Alex has said, we do know what our customers have said through previous engagement, so we wanted to give you that as a starter. But because we are co-creating this plan and doing this from scratch, please feel free that if you don't like any of the things that are on that slide, which will appear on the boards at your tables, by all means cross them out and start again, challenge them. They're just to give you a starter and get a discussion started. Next one is network resilience. So we're rattling through these now. Network resilience is faults, but it's faults in a different context, and the context is stormy weather and extreme weather. So this is about how we deal with those events where you get really poor weather and you get a high volume of faults and interruptions all at the same time. We've put the little image there from Storm Kiara, and when we were talking about these roadshow presentations, will that still be relevant? Will there have been another one? Well, there's been, Dennis, and looking at the weather this week, I think we might have some more through the end of this week and next. We could be well through the names by the end of the stakeholder engagement. But I think that, interestingly, shows another item that's on that screen, which is that there's an element of climate change into this, because we'd often get storms that were a storm followed by a calm period. We now seem to get storms that are followed by another storm, or a period of rain and another storm. So you get different priorities, in that you might have a storm that's come after a period of rain, which means trees that you thought weren't going to impact the network get uprooted and do. The other thing that we've seen in more recent years is often we'll get storms in the summer, and you'll get lightning in the summer. And that's something which a long time ago, we tended not to get. There was always a winter peak of storms, but sometimes you'll now see almost a summer peak as well of stormy weather. And it's a different way for us to mitigate against that, to run the network. We've done some things on that. We're clearing trees at the moment as we do, but we've noticed they're growing faster. We've got flood defences that we've put in place to guard against rainy weather and flooding. New transformers that go on our network have got more protection against lightning than the older ones had. And that's steps we've already taken to change our resilience against those severe weather events. But that's the discussion area, and that's, again, separate to normal no supplies. This is about stormy weather. There's some things. I've talked about those: tree cutting, flood protection. And the third one, cyber resilience. So I told you this was a canter through a selection of topics. We've left the network and faults behind, and now we're on to cyber resilience. What's that all about? Well, we're no different to any other company in that we are vulnerable to cyber attacks. People are trying to penetrate our systems all day, every day. And the thing with cyber attacks is that somebody that wants to attack us only has to be successful once, whereas on the flip side of that, we have to be 100% good at defending every single time. So it's a high barrier for us to ensure that our network is secure. The context that we're working in is that we've got that standard sort of office setup that any company might have. So 7,500 desktop and laptop computers, 122,000 emails blocked each month, lots of standard traffic attacks. But we're moving to become a DSO, a distribution system operator. We're moving to operate the network more flexibly. We need more information on the network. So that means from a network point of view, we're getting to a position where we had connectivity ends from a data point of view at 1,800 of our major substations. It's likely that will go out to more of our secondary substations. The sort of substations that are at the end of your street will start having connectivity. We will start taking real-time data from them. That just increases the cyber risk because you increase points where people could potentially access our system. And the numbers there, 1,800 primary sites down to maybe 200,000 distribution sites, it's a scale bigger. So we need to look at what we do. We need to make sure that we keep the network resilient, but also with us needing more data from our network. Also, customers are looking for more data. So we've done trials with customers with substation data from their local substation, and customers want this data. Aggregators might want it, suppliers might want it, people who are helping you use electricity differently in a low-carbon world might want this data, but it gives you an increased cyber risk. So there's some of the things there which you need to talk about in that section. And it's the two risks are the important ones. Risk of power cuts. If the network gets compromised, there's an opportunity maybe for a power cut. And risk of data, in that the data systems that we've got work, but if you end up with a cyber attack, we might lose some of that data. Let's go big now, and let's talk about whole system approach. And it was already mentioned on the table that I was on, which is good. So hopefully the rest of you did as well. Whole system approach, net zero. This is the big government commitment. So this you can take it all the way back to the Kyoto Agreement, the Paris Agreement, the Carbon Plan, climate change as a whole. In the UK, climate change and decarbonisation means taking heating and transport energy and moving it off carbon sources to renewable electricity. So it's driving electric cars and it's heating homes by electricity. What we've found is that whilst we've got obviously a lot of interest in that because it's more electricity energy being used on our network and electric cars and differently heated homes, is that we need to look at this in a whole system approach. Bigger than just a distribution network operator, bigger than even just the network operator and national grid and the power generators. It needs to be looking at the gas system as well. The figures that you've got there, at the moment, the energy demand, 26% by electricity, 74% by gas. Well, that will change. If decarbonisation means no gas, then 100% of that energy becomes electricity. So there's a big shift of the energy balance in the UK, a big shift of the way we work, but there are questions. the gas industry will talk about green gas, they'll talk about hydrogen, they'll look at different options. So is it going to be 100% for us, or is there still other alternatives that will be in the mix? And that's really where we want you to start talking, start giving us some ideas. The context of what we've done is that we forecast out what we expect to see on our network. We do that through future energy scenarios for each of our licence areas. We align those with National Grid. So from an electricity point of view, we've got a pretty joined up system and model based on our assumptions. But are our assumptions right? And what we need to do is we need to work with the gas companies as well, work with government, look where things are going. We were talking about a climate emergency on our table, where one of the local authorities in the southwest wants to get to net zero by 2035. And it's like, well, actually, when that dawns on you, it's not very far away from now. And in the scale of what we're doing, it's not far after the end of this business plan. So if we need to make changes, they need to be included now. The last area for you in this quick canter through all these sections, innovation and new services. Innovation has been key to us doing what we've done over many, many years. A lot of the work which has allowed us to connect renewable generation to our network has been delivered because of innovation improvements and changes that we've made to the way that we run. And innovation and flexibility sort of fit together, because early innovation schemes were all about flexibly connecting generation, renewable generation to our networks. It was about making better use of our network, making more flexible use of our network, and the Southwest did really well at connecting renewable energy. It was one of the first places where we used alternative connections to allow essentially more generation to connect than the system could support, because we could share the system with other fuel sources. That's carried on, and that's led into a flexibility proposition, which Alex talked about briefly, which is where we're now looking at our network and looking at reinforcements that we need to do and thinking, well, if we only need to reinforce for a few hours, days, or weeks a year, do we need to do that with conventional reinforcement? Do we need to change transformers, change cables? Or can we just buy our way out of that small period of peak? And that's an area of flexibility which we're well into now. We are, as it says already, looking for another 334 megawatts of flexibility capacity this year. And where customers can react to that, then we will pay them to react and change their usage. And I think that's an early step into the world of flexibility and future flexible system operatum, where customers see a time of day impact to what they're doing. At the moment it's commercial customers, but I think that flexibility will move down to domestic customers as tariffs change. You might get a time of day tariff in the future that tries to keep your usage away from an evening peak. But more areas, more data as well, so that takes you all the way back around to cybersecurity, more data and more usage. There's a set of elements there, and I think as well as that innovation, new services, people are looking to see how can we facilitate heat pumps, how can we facilitate electric vehicles. Comes back round to all those climate emergencies and decarbonisation plans. So that was a really quick canter through 5 topics. What I now do is leave you to your roundtable discussions. As has already been explained, some of you start talking about the second half, and then you swap over halfway through with the first half. It's the first time we did it was yesterday, and it worked well. So let's see if we can make it work well twice in a row. I'll leave you to the table discussion.